The moment Alpha Damien's claws ripped through the mating mark on her shoulder, Elara felt her wolf die inside her chest, but she refused to follow. Blood ran hot down her arm, soaking through the white ceremonial dress she'd spent 3 months sewing by hand. Every stitch had been a prayer. Every bead she'd attached with trembling fingers had been a promise to herself that this day would change everything. It had. Just not the way she'd hoped. "Did you really think I would bind myself to an Omega?" Damien's voice rang across the ceremonial platform, pitched to carry to every wolf in attendance. 300 pack members stood in the torchlit clearing, and not one of them moved to help her. "My Luna must be worthy of the Blackwood name. You were never worthy of anything." Elara couldn't speak. The pain was too vast, swallowing her whole. Not the physical agony of her torn shoulder that she could survive. It was the severing of something deeper, the bond that had sparked to life the moment she'd turned 18 and caught his scent across the training grounds. For 2 years she'd loved him. For 2 years she'd believed he was learning to love her back. She'd been a fool. Serena stepped forward, her copper hair gleaming in the firelight, her smile sharp enough to cut. She was everything Elara wasn't: highborn, beautiful, the daughter of the Western Ridge Alpha, a political prize. "Don't feel too badly," Serena said, her voice carrying that particular sweetness that always preceded cruelty. "I'm sure there's some rogue out there desperate enough to take you." Laughter rippled through the crowd. A few wolves she'd grown up with. Some she'd called friends. Elara's wolf, usually so quiet, so submissive, let out a howl of anguish that only she could hear. Then that inner voice went silent in a way that terrified her more than the blood still dripping from her wound. She ran. She didn't remember shifting, didn't remember her bones breaking and reforming into her small grey wolf. She only knew that one moment she was standing on that platform with her heart in pieces, and the next she was tearing through the forest with the wind screaming past her ears. Behind her she heard Damien's voice calling out something, maybe an order to let her go, maybe a command to hunt her down. She didn't care. She just ran and kept running until the familiar scent markers of Blackwood territory faded into nothing but pine and rot and the acrid smell of the forbidden territories. 3 days later, Elara was fairly certain she was dying. The wound on her shoulder had festered. She'd found water twice, but no food she could catch. Her wolf was too weak, too broken, and prey animals seemed to sense it. They didn't even bother to run from her anymore. A rabbit had looked at her yesterday with what she swore was pity before hopping lazily away. She'd shifted back to human form because it took less energy, and now she stumbled through the underbrush in the remains of her ceremonial dress, the white fabric brown with dirt and rust with dried blood. Her bare feet were cut to ribbons. Her lips were cracked, her vision swimming. But she kept walking. Because if she stopped, she'd think. And if she thought, she'd remember the look on Damien's face as he'd announced her rejection. Not cruel, not angry, just bored. Like she was a minor inconvenience he was finally addressing. 2 years of loving him. 2 years of being patient while he figured things out. 2 years of swallowing her pride every time he paraded other females in front of her, telling herself it was just politics, just pack dynamics, that he'd choose her in the end because they were fated. The mate bond was supposed to be sacred, unbreakable. A gift from the moon goddess herself. The moon goddess, Elara had decided, was either cruel or non-existent. She stumbled over a root and went down hard, her palms scraping against rocks and dead leaves. For a long moment she just lay there, breathing in the smell of earth and decay, thinking about how easy it would be to close her eyes and let the forest take her. Then her wolf stirred. It was the faintest flutter, like a heartbeat she'd thought had stopped. "Get up." Elara squeezed her eyes shut. Why? No answer, just that persistent, desperate pressure to move. She dragged herself upright, took one step, then another. The trees here were different, older, massive, their trunks wider than houses. She'd never seen anything like them, and some distant part of her brain that still cared about survival whispered a warning. She'd crossed into somewhere new, somewhere she didn't belong. The border came out of nowhere. No visible marker, no fence, just a sudden wall of scent, so powerful it hit her like a physical blow. Pack territory. Not Blackwood. Nothing like Blackwood. This smell was deeper, older, layered with generations of wolves who had lived and died and buried their dead in this soil. She should turn back. She couldn't turn back. There was nothing to turn back to. Ilara crossed the boundary. The patrol found her within minutes. They were huge, the 3 wolves who surrounded her, grey and black and one the colour of dark chocolate, all of them easily twice her size. Warriors, obviously, from the way they moved, coordinated, precise, their eyes sharp with intelligence as they assessed the threat she posed. Which was none. She could barely stand. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracked from disuse. I didn't mean to." The largest wolf, the grey one, shifted. He was a mountain of a man, scarred and grim-faced, with the kind of eyes that had seen too much death to be impressed by anything. "You're on Silver Crown land," he said it flatly, no question in his tone. "Nobody enters Silver Crown land without the Alpha King's permission." Alpha King. The words penetrated her fever-hazed mind slowly. She knew that title. Everyone knew that title. Caden Voss, ruler of the largest and most powerful pack on the continent. His territory spanned 3 mountain ranges and everything in between. His wolves were legendary, disciplined, deadly, fiercely loyal to their king. He also, according to rumour, executed trespassers without trial. "I'll leave," Ilara said, though she knew she wouldn't make it 10 feet. "I'm sorry. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed—" "You're injured." The warrior cut her off, his nostrils flaring as he caught the scent of infection. "And you're wearing a ceremonial dress. Rejected." The word was a knife between her ribs. She couldn't answer, but she didn't need to. Her silence said everything. Something flickered in the warrior's expression. Not quite sympathy, but close. "You're coming with us. The Alpha King will decide what to do with you." "I'd rather you just kill me here," Ilara heard herself say. The warrior's mouth twitched. It might have been a smile on a softer face. "That's not my call. Move." They carried her most of the way, one of the wolves shifting back to catch her when her legs gave out completely. The Silver Crown pack house emerged from the forest like something out of a fever dream. Not a house at all, but a fortress. Stone walls rising 3 stories high, torches blazing from every window despite the afternoon sun. Wolves stopped to stare as the patrol brought her through the gates. She must look like a nightmare, Ilara thought distantly. A walking corpse in a ruined wedding dress. Inside was warmer, cleaner, full of rich smells she was too sick to identify. The warriors led her through hallway after hallway until they reached a set of massive oak doors carved with silver wolves running beneath a crescent moon. The throne room. She was going to die in a throne room. There was something almost funny about that. The rejected Omega, executed by a king. Damien would probably laugh when he heard. The doors swung open. The room beyond was vast and austere, more war chamber than court. Maps covered every wall. A long table dominated the centre, scattered with papers and figures that looked like military strategy. At the far end, on a throne of dark wood and darker iron, sat the Alpha King. He was younger than she'd expected, younger and more beautiful, in a terrible kind of way. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair that fell across a forehead lined with concentration, eyes the colour of winter ice. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment those eyes passed over her with clinical disinterest. Then he went still. His wolf surged forward so suddenly that Ilara stumbled back. She felt it like a wave of heat, of power, crashing against her broken form. His eyes flashed gold, and his hands gripped the arms of his throne hard enough that the wood groaned in protest. Mine. The word wasn't spoken. It was growled, dragged up from somewhere primal, and it echoed through the room with enough force that every wolf present dropped their heads in instinctive submission. Ilara's wolf, silent for 3 days, suddenly threw herself against Ilara's consciousness with a desperation that bordered on violence. Mate, mate, mate. No, no. This couldn't be happening. The bond she'd trusted had nearly destroyed her. The mate she'd loved had torn her apart in front of everyone she knew. She couldn't do this again. She couldn't survive it again. The Alpha King rose from his throne. He moved toward her like a predator, every line of his body taut with barely controlled need. "What's your name?" "Please." The words scraped out of her throat. "Please let me go." He stopped. The gold faded from his eyes, replaced by something more complicated. Confusion, concern, the first crack in his iron control. "Let you go?" "I can't." Her voice broke. Tears she'd refused to shed for 3 days finally spilled down her cheeks, cutting tracks through the dirt on her face. "I can't do this again. The bond, it doesn't mean anything. It's not real. He proved it wasn't real, and I can't. Please. I'm begging you, just let me leave. Reject me now if you want, I don't care, just don't make me hope again." The Alpha King stared at her. Behind her, the warriors shifted uneasily. She'd just begged the most powerful wolf on the continent to reject her. That probably counted as either insanity or treason, possibly both. But Caden Voss didn't look angry. He looked, for the first time, uncertain, like he'd prepared for 100 different scenarios, and this wasn't any of them. "Who rejected you?" His voice was quiet now, controlled. She shook her head. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered. "Tell me his name." The command rolled through her, alpha power she couldn't resist even in her weakened state. "Damien. Alpha Damien of the Blackwood Pack." Something dangerous flickered across the king's face. "And what did he do to you?" She couldn't stop the words. "He tore out our bond. In front of everyone, he chose someone else, someone better, and he—" Her hand went to her shoulder, to the wound still seeping beneath her dress. The growl that erupted from the Alpha King made the floor shake. Then she felt it, the pull of unconsciousness, her body finally giving up the fight it had been losing for days. Her knees buckled, the world tilted. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was his voice, low and fierce against her ear. "I'm not him, and I will never, ever let you go." Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. Ilara woke to the smell of herbs and the soft crackle of a fire. For a long, disoriented moment, she thought she was back in her mother's cottage, back before the fever had taken her mother and left Ilara alone in a pack that had never wanted her. She kept her eyes closed, holding on to the illusion, letting herself pretend she was 12 again and safe and loved. Then the pain in her shoulder flared, and reality came crashing back. She was in a bed, a real bed, with clean sheets and pillows softer than anything she'd ever touched. The room around her was small but warm, firelight dancing across stone walls hung with dried lavender and rosemary. A healer's quarters, she realized. Someone had bandaged her shoulder, cleaned the dirt from her skin, dressed her in a simple linen shift. Someone had cared for her. The thought was so foreign it made her chest ache. "You're awake." Ilara turned her head. A woman sat in a chair by the fire, silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical braid, hands busy with some kind of needlework. She had the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades dealing with difficult patients and had long since lost patience for nonsense. "I'm Miriam," the woman said, not looking up from her work. "Head healer. You've been unconscious for 2 days. The infection in your shoulder nearly killed you. Would have, if you'd stayed in those woods another night." 2 days. Ilara tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Her body felt like it had been taken apart and reassembled incorrectly. "Don't." Miriam's voice was sharp. "You're not ready to move yet." The Alpha King has ordered complete bed rest until I say otherwise. The Alpha King. The memory hit her like cold water, those ice blue eyes turning gold. That single word growled with enough force to shake the foundations of her broken soul. Mine. I need to leave, Ilara said. No. You don't understand. I can't stay here. He thinks I'm his mate. Yes, I'm aware. Miriam finally looked up, and her eyes were kinder than her voice. The whole palace is aware. The Alpha King hasn't left the hallway outside this room in 2 days except for a council meeting he couldn't avoid. He's been pacing like a caged animal, driving my assistants mad with questions about your condition. Something twisted in Ilara's stomach. Not quite hope. She'd learned better than to hope, but something adjacent to it. Something dangerous. I told him I don't want the bond. You did. Miriam's needles clicked steadily. And he's respecting that, which frankly shocked everyone who knows him. Caden Voss is not a man accustomed to being denied anything. But he's given orders that you're not to be pressured, not to be touched without permission, not to be made uncomfortable in any way. You're to be treated as an honoured guest until you're well enough to make your own decisions. And then, that's between you and him. Ilara stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of a world that had stopped following the rules she understood. Alphas took what they wanted. That was the first lesson every Omega learned, usually before they could walk. An Alpha's desire was law. An Alpha's claim was absolute. Damien had taught her that lesson thoroughly. Every time he'd touched her before the ceremony, every time he'd staked his claim in public only to humiliate her in private, every time he'd reminded her that she existed at his pleasure and could be discarded at his whim. Why? She whispered. Miriam's hands stilled. Why what, child? Why would he wait? Why would he give me a choice? I'm nobody. I'm less than nobody. I'm a rejected Omega from an enemy pack. He could do whatever he wanted to me and no one would stop him. No one would even care. The healer was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its sharp edge. I've known Caden Voss since he was a boy. Watched him grow up in the shadow of a father who thought cruelty was strength and violence was power. Watched him fight a war at 18 to free this pack from that legacy. He's not a gentle man, and he's not a patient one. But he has never, in all his years of rule, taken anything that wasn't freely given. She paused. Whatever that Blackwood Alpha did to you, whatever he taught you about what Alphas are, Caden is not that. He never has been. Ilara wanted to believe her. The wanting was a physical ache, worse than her shoulder, worse than the hunger that still gnawed at her despite whatever broth they'd been getting down her throat. She wanted to believe that somewhere in the world there was an Alpha who didn't see her as property, but wanting had nearly destroyed her once. She couldn't afford it again. I'd like to sleep now, she said. Miriam nodded, gathering her needlework. At the door, she paused. He'll want to see you when you're stronger. That's not a command. You can refuse, but he'll ask. Just so you know. She left before Ilara could respond. A week passed before Miriam declared her well enough to walk. Another 3 days before she was allowed to leave the healer's quarters and face the world beyond. She'd expected a dungeon, or at least a locked room, some kind of confinement appropriate for a trespasser awaiting judgment. Instead, a young servant girl named Petra arrived to escort her to her new chambers, a small but comfortable room in the palace's east wing, with a window overlooking the gardens and a fireplace all her own. The Alpha King wanted you to have a view, Petra explained, practically vibrating with nervous energy. She couldn't have been older than 16, all gangly limbs and wide eyes. He said, well, he asked what kind of rooms you might like, and I said I didn't know because I'd never met you. And he said to pick something with good light and growing things nearby because you seemed like someone who needed growing things, and I didn't really understand what he meant, but these rooms have the best view of the gardens, so I thought, this is perfect, Ilara interrupted, because the girl looked like she might pass out if she kept talking. Thank you, Petra beamed. The Alpha King also said to tell you that you're welcome anywhere in the palace grounds except the war room and the Eastern Armory, and that you're not a prisoner, and that if anyone makes you feel like a prisoner, you should tell him immediately and he'll handle it. She paused, brow furrowing. He said that last part kind of intensely, like maybe he'd handle it with violence. In spite of everything, Elara felt her mouth twitch. Did he? He's been very specific about your accommodations. Very, very specific. The kitchen staff have a list of foods you're supposed to be offered. Nothing too heavy until your stomach adjusts. Lots of protein for healing. Fresh bread every morning because apparently he noticed you looking at the bread basket during your meeting. Petra's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm not supposed to ask about your meeting. Everyone says the Alpha King carried you out of the throne room himself and almost killed Lord Marcus when he suggested putting you in the dungeons. Ilara's chest did something complicated. Lord Marcus? The Alpha King's chief advisor. He's... Petra glanced around nervously. He's not very nice, but he's smart, and the Alpha King trusts him to say things other people won't. Mostly things about politics and wars and not trusting strangers. He's not wrong. Ilara moved to the window, looking down at the gardens below. Even in early autumn, they were beautiful. Ordered rows of herbs and vegetables, carefully tended flower beds, ancient fruit trees heavy with the last of the season's harvest. I am a stranger. The Alpha King would be wise not to trust me. But you're his... Petra stopped herself, clapping a hand over her mouth. It's all right. I know what I am. The words came out steadier than Ilara felt. I'm his mate, but that doesn't mean I'm safe, or trustworthy, or worth the trouble of keeping. My last mate figured that out quickly enough. The silence stretched between them. When Ilara turned, Petra was watching her with an expression that looked dangerously close to pity. I don't know anything about mates, the girl said quietly, but I know the Alpha King hasn't been the same since you arrived. Everyone's noticed. He's still scary, but it's different now. Distracted. Like he's waiting for something. She hesitated. My mother says that the moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, that if you're meant for someone, there's a reason, even if you can't see it yet. My experience with the moon goddess, Ilara said, has not been encouraging. Petra nodded solemnly, like this was reasonable. I'll bring your breakfast in the morning, and if you need anything at all, my room is just down the corridor. The Alpha King made me promise to look after you. He was very serious about it. After she left, Ilara sat on the edge of her new bed and tried to remember how to breathe. She asked for work the next day. The request clearly caught the palace staff off guard. She was the Alpha King's mate, or almost mate, or rejected mate turned second chance mate. The terminology seemed to vary depending on who was whispering about her. Mates of rulers didn't work. They sat in pretty rooms and wore pretty dresses and produced heirs on demand. But Ilara had never been pretty, had never owned a dress that wasn't made by her own hands, and the thought of sitting idle while her mind ate itself alive was unbearable. She needed to move, needed to feel useful, needed to prove, if only to herself, that she was worth the space she was taking up. The head gardener, a gruff older man named Thomas, was the first to give in to her persistent requests. Fine, he said, squinting at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. But if the Alpha King turns me into a fur rug for letting his mate dig in the dirt, I'm blaming you. I'm not his mate. Sure you're not. The work was exactly what she needed. Simple, physical, demanding enough to quiet the thoughts that wouldn't stop circling. She weeded and planted and pruned, learning the rhythms of the Silver Crown Gardens, discovering which herbs grew where and why. The earth under her fingernails felt honest. The ache in her muscles felt earned. And slowly, almost without her permission, she began to see. The Silver Crown pack was nothing like Blackwood. At Blackwood, rank was everything. You were born into your position, and you died in it. Omegas served. Betas followed, alphas ruled. The hierarchy was absolute, enforced by violence and maintained by fear. Ilara had learned early to keep her head down. her voice soft, her opinions non-existent. Here she watched a young Omega correct a Beta warrior's stance during training, and the warrior thanked her and adjusted. She saw servants speak freely to nobles, disagreements aired openly without fear of punishment. She heard the Alpha King's name spoken with respect that bordered on reverence, but never with the cringing terror that had accompanied any mention of Damien. "Merit," Thomas told her one afternoon when she finally asked about it. "That's how Silver Crown works. You rise by what you do, not who your parents were." The Alpha King's best general started as a kitchen boy. His head healer was a rogue before he found her. He doesn't care where you come from. He cares what you're willing to become. That's not how most packs work. No, it's not. Thomas sat back on his heels, wiping dirt from his weathered hands. His father was the old way, brutal bastard who ruled through pain and took what he wanted from anyone who caught his eye. When Caden challenged him, barely more than a pup, hadn't even had his first shift, everyone thought he was dead. Instead, he killed the old Alpha and spent the next decade rebuilding everything from scratch. He paused, studying her. He's not gentle, girl. Don't mistake kindness for softness. I've seen him tear a man's throat out for threatening a pup. But he's fair, and he's patient. And once he decides something matters to him, he doesn't let go. Ilara's hands stilled in the dirt. Is that supposed to reassure me? It's supposed to be the truth. What you do with it is your business. She saw Caden from a distance over the following weeks. He was impossible to miss, taller than most of his warriors, broader through the shoulder, carrying himself with the unconscious authority of someone who had never in his life been questioned. She'd catch glimpses of him crossing the courtyard, emerging from council meetings, training with his soldiers in the pre-dawn light. He never approached her, never tried to speak to her or corner her or assert the claim his wolf clearly wanted to make. But she felt his eyes on her sometimes, that ice-blue gaze tracking her movements across the garden with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He was waiting, she realized, just as Petra had said, waiting for her to come to him. The patience should have reassured her. Instead, it made her nervous in ways she couldn't explain. She understood alphas who took. She'd spent her whole life learning to survive them, but an alpha who held himself back, who restrained his own instincts out of respect for her fear. That was a creature she had no defense against. "They're saying he's gone soft." The voice drifted through the garden hedge, freezing Ilara in place. She'd been trimming the rosemary, hidden from view by a thick wall of greenery. The speakers clearly didn't know she was there. "The Alpha King? Soft?" A second voice dripping with disbelief. "Have you seen him in the training yard? He nearly took Garrett's arm off yesterday." "Not in the ring. With her. That Omega he's keeping." A long pause. Then, "You shouldn't talk about the Alpha King's mate that way." "She's not his mate. She's his charity case." The first voice was sharp, female, carrying the particular venom of someone who'd made pettiness into an art form. "Did you know she was rejected? Publicly, in front of her whole pack. Her alpha tore out their bond and chose someone else, someone better. I heard. She came crawling here half dead, covered in her own filth, begging for scraps. And now the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf on the continent, is supposed to want her. Please, he's just too honourable to throw her out. It's pity, nothing more. But the mate bond means nothing if he doesn't want to accept it. And why would he? She's an Omega. She's damaged goods. No Alpha King would ever truly want her discarded." Ilara didn't hear the rest. She was already moving, walking fast through the garden paths, not running because running would mean admitting how much the words had cut. Charity case. Damaged goods. Discarded. She made it back to her room before the tears came. The knock on her door came 3 hours later. Ilara had stopped crying by then, had washed her face and composed herself, and buried the hurt so deep she could almost pretend it wasn't there. But when she opened the door and found Caden Voss standing in the hallway, all that careful composure crumbled. He looked exhausted. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there when she'd first been dragged before him, and a tension in his jaw that suggested he'd been clenching it for days. He was dressed simply, without the royal trappings she'd expected, just a plain dark shirt and worn leather pants, like he'd come straight from training. "May I come in?" His voice was rough, formal. "I won't stay long. There's something I need to tell you." Ilara stepped aside. She couldn't have spoken if she'd tried. He entered like he was walking into enemy territory, careful and alert, keeping himself on the far side of the room from her, like he was afraid of spooking her, like she was something fragile he might accidentally break. "A messenger arrived this morning." He didn't look at her as he spoke, his eyes fixed on some point beyond her window. "From Blackwood Pack, from your former alpha." Her blood went cold. "Damien. He knows you're here. Word travels even between territories." Caden's hands curled into fists at his sides. "He's sent a formal demand for your return." The room tilted. Ilara reached for the bedpost to steady herself. "He can't." The rejection was final. "He has no claim on me." He's arguing that the rejection was never properly completed, that because you fled before the ceremony concluded, you're still technically bound to his pack. Caden's voice was flat, controlled, but she could see the muscles in his neck standing out like cables. It's nonsense legally, but he's also making noises about treaties and insults and the cost of harbouring another alpha's property. Property. The word landed like a blow. "There's more." Caden finally looked at her, and his eyes were blazing with something she couldn't name. "The real reason he wants you back, his chosen Luna, Serena, has failed to conceive. It's been 2 years of trying and nothing. The pack elders are talking, saying the moon goddess is punishing him for rejecting his true mate." Ilara's laugh came out broken. "So now I'm valuable. Now that he needs me to fix his mistake. He will never touch you again." The words were a growl, low and dangerous, vibrating with barely leashed violence. "I want you to understand that. Whatever you decide about us, whatever you want your life here to look like, I will burn his pack to the ground before I let him take you back." She stared at him. This man who had been a stranger 3 weeks ago. This Alpha King who had every right to claim her, use her, discard her just as Damien had. "Why?" The question scraped out of her throat. "You heard what they say about me. Charity case. Damaged goods. Why would you fight a war over someone no one else wanted?" Caden crossed the room in 3 strides. He stopped just short of touching her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. See the flecks of silver in his winter blue eyes? "Because they're wrong." His voice was quiet now, intense. "Because my wolf has waited 12 years for you, and I've spent every day since you arrived trying to be patient enough to deserve you. Because when I look at you, I don't see a charity case. I see the strongest person I've ever met, someone who survived a betrayal that would have destroyed anyone else and kept walking until she found her way to me." Ilara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I can't promise I'll be what you need," he continued. "I don't know how to be gentle, and I don't know how to be patient, and my wolf is going insane with the need to mark you so thoroughly that no one will ever question who you belong to." His hands came up, hovering near her face without quite touching. "But I can promise that I will never hurt you, never reject you, never make you feel like you're less than the miracle you are." "You don't know me. Then let me learn." His forehead dropped to rest against hers, the contact electric even through her fear. "Stay. Not as my mate, not yet. Stay as whatever you need to be. A guest, a servant, a stranger who happens to live in my palace. But stay, Ilara, and let me prove that the mate bond can be more than pain." She should say no. Every survival instinct she'd developed over 22 years of life was screaming at her to run, to protect herself, to never again trust an alpha's pretty words. But her wolf, silent for so long, was howling. And for the first time since Damien's claws had torn through her shoulder, Ilara felt something other than despair. She felt the first, fragile stirring of hope. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 3. The delegation from Blackwood arrived at dawn. Ilara knew before anyone told her. She felt it in the sudden tension that rippled through the palace, in the way servants stopped mid-conversation and guards straightened at their posts. She felt it in the cold knot that formed in her stomach and refused to loosen, no matter how many deep breaths she forced herself to take. She was in the garden when Petra found her, the girl's face pale and her eyes wide with poorly concealed panic. "The Alpha King requests your presence in the throne room." Petra's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. He said to tell you that you don't have to come, that he can handle this without you, but he thought you'd want to be there. Ilara set down her pruning shears. Her hands, she noticed distantly, were completely still. Strange how the body could be calm when the mind was screaming. How many? 12. The Alpha himself, his beta, and 10 warriors. Petra swallowed hard. They're in the Great Hall now, waiting. The Alpha King refused to receive them in the throne room until you'd been informed. 12 wolves. Damien had brought 12 wolves into enemy territory, which meant he was either supremely confident or spectacularly stupid. Knowing Damien, it was probably both. "I'll need to change," Ilara heard herself say. "I can't face him covered in dirt." 30 minutes later, she stood outside the throne room doors in a simple grey dress that Miriam had pressed into her hands. Good quality, modest, nothing that would draw attention. Her hair was pulled back from her face, her shoulder wound hidden beneath the fabric. She looked, she thought, like exactly what she was. A servant. A nobody. Damaged goods graciously being stored until someone decided what to do with her. The doors swung open. The throne room was exactly as she remembered it, vast, austere, more war chamber than court. But today it was filled with wolves, silver crown warriors lining the walls in a show of force that made the Blackwood delegation look laughably small. At the far end, Caden sat on his throne of dark wood and iron. Dressed in black, his face carved from ice, and there, standing in the centre of the room like he owned it, was Damien. He hadn't changed. That was the first coherent thought that penetrated Ilara's fear. Same golden hair, same arrogant stance, same cruel smile that she'd once mistaken for charm. He was handsome. She could acknowledge that objectively now from a distance, the way you might acknowledge that a viper had beautiful scales. Handsome and hollow and utterly without remorse. He was speaking when she entered, his voice carrying that familiar tone of bored condescension. "Don't see why this requires such theatre, Voss. The girl is Blackwood property. She was born in my territory, raised under my protection, and fled before her formal release could be completed. I'm simply here to collect what's mine." "She's not yours." Caden's voice was flat, dangerous. "She stopped being yours the moment you tore your claim from her shoulder and left her bleeding on your ceremonial platform." "A lover's quarrel." Damien waved a dismissive hand. "These things happen. I'm prepared to be generous, to overlook her flight, her trespass into your territory, even the rumors that you've been keeping her in your palace like some kind of pet. I'll take her back, and we'll say no more about it." Ilara's feet carried her forward without her permission. She moved along the edge of the room, staying close to the wall, trying to make herself invisible. But the movement caught attention, first from the Silver Crown wolves, who parted silently to let her pass, and then from the Blackwood delegation, whose eyes tracked her with undisguised interest. And then from Damien. He turned, and for the first time in 2 years, Ilara met the eyes of the man who had destroyed her. She expected to feel terror, expected the old familiar paralysis, the urge to submit, to apologize, to make herself small enough that he might not notice her. She'd spent 2 years learning that response, had it beaten into her wolf until submission was instinct. But something had changed. The fear was still there, yes, a cold weight in her chest, a tremor in her hands that she couldn't quite control. But beneath it, threading through it like steel through silk, was something else. Something that felt dangerously like anger. He'd thrown her away, humiliated her, left her to die in the forbidden territories without a backward glance. And now he was standing in another alpha's throne room, calling her property, acting like she was a misplaced object he'd graciously come to retrieve. Ilara lifted her chin and kept walking. She didn't stop until she reached the throne, until she was standing in the one place in the room that no wolf stood without permission, behind the Alpha King's right shoulder, the Luna's position. The silence that fell was absolute. Damien's expression flickered, surprise, then disbelief, then something darker. His eyes swept over her, cataloguing the changes, the healthy colour in her cheeks, the weight she'd regained, the way she held herself like she had a right to be there. Well, his voice had lost some of its smoothness. It seems my Omega has been getting ideas above her station. Step forward, Ilara. Now. The command hit her like a physical force. 2 years of conditioning, 2 years of learning that his word was law, 2 years of submission carved into her very bones. Her body wanted to obey. Her wolf, still weak, still wounded, trembled with the urge to comply. She took a single step forward. Caden's hand shot out. His fingers closed around her wrist, not hard, not painful, but absolutely immovable. He pulled her against his side, his arm coming around her waist like a band of iron, anchoring her to him. She's mine now. The words weren't spoken. They were unleashed. A growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once, that shook the stone walls and rattled the weapons mounted on their racks. Every wolf in the room dropped their gaze, even the Blackwood warriors, even Damien's beta, unable to withstand the raw power radiating from the Alpha King. Ilara felt it wash over her like a wave of heat, felt something in her chest respond to it, something that had been silent and cold and dying since the night of her rejection. Her wolf stirred, weak as a newborn pup, but stirring nonetheless. Mate, that inner voice whispered. Ours. Damien was the only one who didn't lower his eyes. His face had gone pale with fury, his hands clenched at his sides, but he held his ground through what must have been sheer force of will. You're claiming her? His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. An Omega. A rejected, broken Omega who can barely hold her wolf together. You're the Alpha King, Voss. You could have any female on the continent. And you're choosing my scraps? Caden's arm tightened around Ilara's waist. When he spoke, his voice was soft, terrifyingly soft, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. Call her that again and I'll tear your tongue out through your throat. The threat hung in the air, absolutely sincere. Ilara felt the rumble of it through Caden's chest, where she was pressed against him, felt the coiled tension in his muscles, the way his wolf was straining against his control. He would do it, she realized. If Damien pushed him even slightly further, Caden would kill him right here in front of both packs, consequences be damned. And some treacherous part of her wanted him to. Damien must have seen it too because he took a careful step back. This is a violation of pack law. She was born Blackwood. She was never formally released from our pack. You have no right to claim her. I have every right. The mate bond supersedes pack allegiance. That's law older than either of our bloodlines. Caden's voice had steadied, though his grip on Ilara hadn't loosened. She was rejected. She fled. She crossed into my territory and was found by my wolves. Whatever claim you had ended the moment you chose another female and tried to rip the bond from her body. The rejection wasn't completed. The ceremony was completed the moment she left your territory, alive. You had your chance to finish it properly, to release her with whatever shred of dignity you were capable of showing. Instead, you let her run into the wilds, to die. Caden rose from his throne, bringing Alara with him, keeping her tucked against his side like she was something precious, something worth protecting. She's mine now, Damien, by right of the mate bond, by right of sanctuary, by right of the fact that I will burn your pack to ashes before I let you touch her again. The Blackwood wolves shifted uneasily. They were badly outnumbered, badly outmatched, and they knew it. Even Damien's beta was starting to look like he wanted to be anywhere else, but Damien himself just smiled. It was the smile Alara remembered from their courtship, cold, calculating, the expression of a man who always had another card to play. It sent ice sliding down her spine, freezing the fragile warmth that Caden's claim had kindled. Very well. Damien spread his hands in a gesture of surrender that fooled no one. You want to claim a broken Omega as your Luna? That's your prerogative, I suppose, but we both know this isn't over. It's over if I say it's over. No, Voss. It's over when the council says it's over. Damien's smile widened. You've just publicly claimed a female from another pack, without her formal consent and without a completed mating bond. That's unprecedented. The Council of Alphas will want to verify the legitimacy of your claim, and we both know what that means. Alara felt Caden go still beside her. You'll have to prove the bond is genuine, Damien continued, his voice silky with triumph. A full claiming, a completed mark, a lunar presentation before the council, with all the traditional rites and ceremonies. Can you do that, I wonder? Can your traumatized little Omega open herself up enough to accept a new bond, after what I did to her? He turned his attention to Alara for the first time since she'd taken her position behind the throne. His eyes raked over her with something that might have been possession, might have been contempt, might have been some twisted combination of both. I broke her, you know. Not just her wolf. Her. She was already fragile when I found her, already desperate for someone to want her. It was so easy to make her believe I did. So easy to build her up just to watch her shatter. He cocked his head, studying her like a specimen under glass. Do you really think she can bond again? Do you think she can give herself to anyone after everything I taught her about trust? Alara couldn't speak, couldn't move. Every word was a knife, cutting through the thin layer of healing she'd managed over the past weeks and exposing the raw wound beneath. He was right. That was the worst part. He was right, and he knew it, and he was going to win, because of it. She couldn't complete a bond, couldn't open herself up that way, couldn't be vulnerable, couldn't trust. Every time Caden touched her, even gently, even kindly, some part of her flinched away. Some part of her was still standing on that platform, still bleeding, still waiting for the cruelty she'd learned to expect. Damien had broken her, and now he was going to use that brokenness to take her back. Get out! Caden's voice cut through her spiral of despair. He wasn't looking at Damien anymore, he was looking at her, his ice-blue eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. What? Damien's smile faltered. I said get out. You've delivered your message. Take your wolves and leave my territory before I decide that war is worth the satisfaction of watching you die. The council. I'll deal with the council. You have until nightfall to be beyond my borders. If any Blackwood wolf is found on Silver Crown land after dark, I'll consider it an act of aggression and respond accordingly. Damien's jaw tightened. For a moment, Alara thought he might push, might say something else, something designed to cut her open one more time. But even his arrogance had limits, and he was surrounded by wolves who would tear him apart the moment their alpha gave the word. This isn't over, he said again, but the words had lost their power. He turned and strode toward the doors, his delegation falling in behind him, and then they were gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Alara realized she was shaking, realized that her hands were pressed against Caden's chest, that she was leaning into him like he was the only solid thing in a tilting world. She should step back, should put distance between them, should protect herself the way she'd learned to do. She couldn't move. "Everyone out." Caden's voice was quiet, but it carried. "Now." The throne room emptied in seconds. Even Lord Marcus, hovering near the door with an expression of deep concern, retreated without argument. The massive oak doors swung shut, and then it was just the two of them, standing in the middle of that vast space, surrounded by maps of territories and the echoes of a confrontation that had changed everything. Caden's hands came up to cup her face. His touch was impossibly gentle, at odds with the violence that had been radiating from him moments before. "Elara, look at me." She forced her eyes to meet his. The silver had faded, replaced by that familiar winter blue, but the intensity remained. He was looking at her like she was something miraculous, something worth fighting for. "He's wrong," Caden said. "Whatever he told you, whatever he made you believe about yourself, it's wrong. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're not something to be discarded or collected or used. You don't know that." Her voice came out cracked. "You don't know what I am, what I can't do. If the council demands proof of the bond, then we'll figure it out. You don't understand. I can't." She pulled away from him, wrapping her arms around herself, trying to hold together pieces that wanted to fly apart. "He's right. I can't bond with you. I can't open myself up that way. Every time I try, every time I think about letting someone in again, I feel his claws in my shoulder. I feel myself bleeding. I feel—" Her voice broke. She turned away. Unable to bear the weight of his gaze, unable to watch his hope curdle into disappointment the way Damien's had. "Elara, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. You claimed me in front of everyone, and now your honor is on the line, and I can't give you what you need. I can't be your Luna. I can't be anyone's anything." He made sure of that. Footsteps behind her. The warmth of him at her back, close but not quite touching. "Can I tell you something?" She didn't answer. Couldn't. "I've been Alpha King for 12 years. In that time, I've been offered alliances, treaties, political marriages from every major pack on the continent. Beautiful females, powerful females, females who could have given me strong heirs and stronger alliances." His breath stirred the hair at the back of her neck. "I turned them all down. Every single one. My court thought I was being stubborn. My council thought I was being foolish. Some of them thought I was incapable of forming a mate bond at all. Why? Because none of them were you." Elara squeezed her eyes shut. "You didn't even know I existed." "No, but my wolf did. He's been waiting for you since I was 18 years old, howling at every full moon, pacing every time I tried to feel something for someone else. 12 years of waiting, Elara. 12 years of being alone, of being incomplete, of knowing that somewhere out there was the one person who could make me whole." His hands settled on her shoulders, light enough that she could pull away if she wanted to. She didn't want to. "I'm not going to force a bond," he said quietly. "I'm not going to push you or pressure you or make you feel like you owe me anything. If it takes a year for you to trust me, I'll wait a year. If it takes 10 years, I'll wait 10 years. If you can never fully bond with me, if the most you can ever give me is what we have right now, I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that. The council can go to hell. I've fought wars over less important things than you. I'll fight another one if I have to." Elara turned in his arms. His face was so close to hers, his eyes burning with something that looked terrifyingly like devotion. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you sacrifice everything for someone you barely know?" "Because you're my mate." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because when I look at you, something in me settles. Something that's been restless and angry and alone for as long as I can remember finally feels like it's found its home." His thumb traced along her cheekbone, catching a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. "I would burn the world for you, Elara. Not because I expect anything in return, but because that's what you deserve. Someone who would burn the world just to keep you warm. Her wolf stirred again, stronger this time, still wounded, still wary, but reaching toward him with something that felt almost like hope. I don't know if I can be what you need, she said. You already are. I don't know if I can complete the bond. Then we won't complete it. But Damien, Caden interrupted, his voice hardening, will learn that there are some things more dangerous than war. He'll learn that the Council's rules mean nothing when the Alpha King decides to ignore them. He'll learn that he made a mistake the day he rejected you, and he'll spend the rest of his miserable life regretting it. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his expression fierce and tender all at once. You're not his broken toy. You're not anyone's property. You're Elara. And you survived something that would have destroyed anyone else, and you walked out of the darkness and into my arms. That makes you the strongest person I've ever known. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt. The Council will demand proof, she said. They'll want to see a mark, a completed bond. Without that, they'll try to take you away from me. Caden's jaw tightened. And I will kill anyone who tries. You can't fight the entire Council. Watch me. In spite of everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the shadows of her past, still clawing at her, Elara felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not quite trust, not quite love, but something adjacent to both, something fragile and precious and terrifying in its newness. I want to try, she heard herself say. The bond. I want to try. Caden went still. Elara, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I'm capable of opening up that way again. But I want to try. For you. For us. She took a shaky breath. For myself. Because maybe the best way to prove that he didn't destroy me is to build something he said I never could. His hands cupped her face again, and this time when he looked at her, there were tears in his eyes too. We'll go slowly, he said. As slowly as you need, and if you ever want to stop, if it ever becomes too much, you tell me, and we stop. No questions, no pressure, no guilt. Your pace, your rules, always. She nodded, not trusting her voice. And Elara? He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her lips. Whatever happens with the Council, whatever Damien tries next, whatever challenges we have to face, you're not facing them alone anymore. You have me, you have my pack. You have a home here, a real home, for as long as you want it. Her wolf let out a sound that was almost a howl. Joy and pain and desperate hope, all tangled together in a cry that seemed to shake her from the inside out. She didn't know if she could complete the bond. Didn't know if she would ever be whole enough to be the Luna that Caden deserved. But for the first time since that night on the ceremonial platform, she wanted to find out. For the first time in years, she wanted to live. Okay, she whispered. Okay. And when Caden smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his harsh features into something almost beautiful, Elara felt something in her chest begin, slowly, tentatively, to mend. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. The Council's decree arrived by Raven 3 days after Damien's departure. Elara was in the garden when she heard, kneeling in the dirt with her hands buried in the soil, trying to find some semblance of peace in the honest work of growing things. Thomas had left her alone that morning, sensing perhaps that she needed solitude more than supervision. She'd been grateful for it, grateful for the silence and the earth and the simple act of coaxing life from the ground. Then Petra came running, her face white as bleached linen, and Elara knew that whatever fragile hope she'd been nurturing was about to be tested. The Council! Petra gasped, doubling over to catch her breath. They've issued a ruling. The Alpha King, he's calling for you. Everyone's gathering in the Great Hall. Ilara didn't ask what the ruling said. She could see it in Petra's eyes, in the way the girl's hands trembled as she helped Ilara to her feet. Whatever the council had decided, it wasn't good. The Great Hall was packed when she arrived. Every noble in Caden's court had gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed hostility. She felt their eyes on her as she walked toward the front of the room, felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on her shoulders like stones. Caden stood near the raised dais, a scroll clutched in his hand, his expression carved from granite. When he saw her, something flickered in his eyes. Relief, perhaps, or determination, but his face remained impassive. The Council of Alphas has issued their decision, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, regarding the disputed claim over Ilara of Blackwood. Former Blackwood, someone muttered. Ilara didn't see who. They have determined that both claims have merit under pack law. Caden's jaw tightened. Alpha Damien's claim rests on her birth pack and incomplete release. My claim rests on the mate bond and right of sanctuary. The council has declined to rule definitively on either. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. Instead, Caden continued, they have issued a compromise. I have been given 3 moon cycles to prove the legitimacy of our bond. A completed mating mark, witnessed by a council representative, will settle the matter permanently in my favour. 3 moon cycles. 3 months to do something she wasn't sure she was capable of doing. And if the bond isn't completed? Lord Marcus stepped forward, his thin face sharp with something that looked almost like anticipation. What then, my king? Caden's eyes went cold. Then Ilara will be surrendered to Blackwood Pack for rehabilitation. The word hung in the air like poison. Rehabilitation. Ilara knew what that meant, had heard whispers of it even in Blackwood, where such things were spoken of only in shadows. Omegas who couldn't bond, who refused to submit, who caused problems for their alphas, were sent to rehabilitation centres deep in the Northern Territories. They came back docile, compliant, empty. They came back as breeders. No. The word escaped her before she could stop it. Every eye in the room turned to her, and she felt her face flush with heat, but she didn't look away. I won't, I can't. Caden crossed the space between them in 3 strides. His hand found hers, his fingers threading through her own, anchoring her. You won't, he said quietly for her ears alone. I swear to you, whatever happens, you will never go back to him. I will tear this continent apart before I let that happen. 3 moon cycles, she whispered. That's not enough time. I don't know if I can. Then we'll find another way. His grip tightened. But I won't force you, Ilara. Not even to save you. You have to choose this. Choose me. Or not. But it has to be your choice. She looked up into his eyes, searching for the lie, the manipulation, the cruelty she'd learned to expect from alphas. She found nothing but fierce, unwavering determination. And something else. Something that looked terrifyingly like love. The weeks that followed were the strangest of Ilara's life. Caden kept his word. He didn't push, didn't pressure, didn't make her feel like a prize to be won or a problem to be solved. Instead, he simply included her in his life, in his work, in the daily rhythms of ruling a kingdom. She attended council meetings, sitting beside him at the long war table while advisors debated trade routes and border disputes. She walked with him through the palace grounds in the evenings, listening as he talked about his childhood, his father, the war that had shaped him into the man he was today. She learned his quirks, the way he rubbed the back of his neck when he was frustrated, the small smile that crossed his face when he thought no one was watching, the nightmares that sometimes woke him before dawn. And slowly, tentatively, she began to let him learn hers. She told him about her mother, who had died when she was 12. About the years of loneliness that followed, being an Omega in a pack that valued nothing but strength. About the desperate hope she'd felt when Damien had first shown interest in her, and the slow, systematic way he'd broken her down until she believed she deserved nothing better. Caden listened to all of it. He never interrupted, never offered empty platitudes, never tried to fix her. He just listened, and when she was done, he held her hand and told her that she was the bravest person he'd ever met. It wasn't enough. The bond still wouldn't come. Every night, Ilara lay in her bed and reached for her wolf, trying to coax that fragile presence closer to the surface. Every night she felt the mate bond humming at the edge of her consciousness, warm and golden and waiting. And every night, just as she began to open herself to it, she felt phantom claws ripping through her shoulder, heard Damien's voice declaring her worthless, watched her own blood drip onto white ceremonial silk. She'd wake gasping, drenched in sweat, her wolf retreating so far inside her that she could barely feel it at all. The deadline crept closer. The whispers in the court grew louder. "He's destroying himself over that Omega," she heard one noble say to another in the corridor. "She's not even pretty. What could possibly be worth this?" The mate bond drives wolves mad sometimes. Perhaps his wolf is defective. Perhaps that's why he never took a Luna before. He knew he was broken. If he'd just let her go, this would all be over. Damien would have what he wants, the council would be satisfied, and we could get back to matters that actually matter. Ilara learned to keep her head down. Learned to pretend she didn't hear. But each word carved a little deeper, each whisper confirming what she'd always known about herself. She was worthless. She was broken. She was destroying the one person who had ever truly tried to help her. She should leave. Should slip away in the night and save Caden from himself. Should walk into the forbidden territories and let the wilds take her, as they should have done the first time. But every time she thought about leaving, she remembered the look on Caden's face when he'd claimed her. The raw, desperate determination. The way his wolf had surged forward with that single word, mine, like it was the only truth in the world. She couldn't leave him. Even if staying meant destroying him, she was that selfish in the end. The gift revealed itself on a Tuesday. Ilara was serving tea at a council meeting. She'd insisted on making herself useful, unable to stand the idleness, when Lord Marcus leaned close to the noble beside him and murmured something she shouldn't have been able to hear. "The Blackwood Alpha is more amenable than we thought. Another moon cycle, perhaps two, and this entire farce will be over." A sensation shot through Ilara like lightning, cold and hot at once, a discordant vibration that seemed to originate somewhere behind her eyes. She nearly dropped the teapot, barely catching herself in time. Lie. The word came from somewhere deep inside her, from a place she'd never known existed. Not her wolf exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something older. Marcus wasn't speculating. He wasn't hoping. He was planning. And whatever he was planning involved Damien. She set down the teapot with shaking hands and retreated to the edge of the room, her mind racing. It could have been imagination. Could have been paranoia, the natural suspicion of a woman who'd learned never to trust anyone in power. But it didn't feel like imagination. It felt like truth. Over the following days, she tested it. Listened when servants complained about their wages. Truth. Listened when a visiting merchant swore his silks were genuine. Lie. Listened when Petra promised she hadn't eaten the last of the honey cakes. Lie, accompanied by guilty crumbs on the girl's collar. The gift was real. Somehow, impossibly, she could sense when someone was lying. She didn't know where it came from, didn't know what it meant, but she knew she needed to understand it better before she told anyone, even Caden. So she went to the palace library. Silver Crown's collection was vast, accumulated over generations of rulers who had valued knowledge as much as strength. Ilara lost herself in the stacks, pulling down volumes on wolf history, Omega bloodlines, Gifts of the moon goddess. Most of it was useless. Legends and fairy tales, warnings about feral wolves and cautionary tales about forbidden magic. Then she found it. The book was old, its leather binding cracked and faded, its pages so fragile they threatened to crumble at her touch. The title, barely legible, read, The Lost Lines, a history of ancient wolf bloodlines and their hidden gifts. She read through the night, her candle burning low, her eyes straining against the tiny, cramped script. And slowly, a picture began to emerge. There had once been omega lines of tremendous power. Not the submissive, servile creatures that modern packs viewed them as, but something else entirely. Advisors, truth seekers, wolves who could sense deception so clearly that no lie could stand in their presence. The gift had been systematically bred out of most bloodlines, the book explained. Alphas who feared being challenged had targeted omega families with the ability, eliminating them or forcing them to mate with wolves who diluted their power. Within a few generations, the truth sense had become little more than legend. But occasionally, rarely, it still emerged. Usually in wolves who had suffered tremendous trauma, whose own bonds had been damaged in ways that opened doors to other kinds of connection. Ilara closed the book and sat in the darkness for a long time. She wasn't just broken. She was something else entirely, something ancient, something valuable, something that had been deliberately destroyed because it threatened the power of alphas like Damien. And she knew now, with absolute certainty, that Lord Marcus was betraying them. She told Caden the next morning. He listened without interrupting, his face growing stonier with each word. When she finished, the gift, the book, what she'd heard Marcus say, he was silent for a long moment. "You're certain," he said finally. "Not suspicion, not interpretation. You're certain Marcus is working with Damien." "Yes," she hesitated. "I know it sounds impossible. I know you have no reason to believe me. But I heard him, and I felt the lie, and I know. I believe you." She stopped, startled. "You do? You have no reason to lie to me. You have no political ambitions. No grudges against Marcus, nothing to gain from making a false accusation." Caden's eyes met hers, steady and fierce. "And I know what truth sense is. My grandmother had it. Weak, barely detectable, but it was there. If you say Marcus is a traitor, then Marcus is a traitor. What will you do?" His smile was cold. "What I should have done the moment he suggested putting you in the dungeons." The execution happened at noon. Ilara hadn't expected it to be public, hadn't expected Caden to drag Marcus before the entire court, to lay out his crimes in excruciating detail, to give the man a chance to defend himself that they both knew would be worthless. But she understood, watching, why he did it. This wasn't just about Marcus. This was a message to everyone who had whispered about her in corridors. Everyone who had looked at her with contempt, everyone who had plotted behind their king's back while smiling to his face. "Lord Marcus has confessed to conspiracy with Alpha Damien of Blackwood," Caden announced, his voice ringing through the great hall. "He offered to help remove my mate from my territory in exchange for political favour. He has been found guilty of treason against the crown." Marcus, kneeling on the stone floor with his hands bound behind his back, looked up with hatred in his eyes. "She's not your mate. She's a broken omega who can't even complete a bond. You're destroying this pack for nothing." "She is everything." Caden drew his sword, the blade singing as it cleared the scabbard. "And anyone who threatens her threatens me. Remember that." The execution was quick, clean. Marcus's head rolled across the stones, and the hall fell silent. Caden sheathed his sword and turned to face his court. His eyes swept across the assembled nobles, lingering on faces that suddenly couldn't meet his gaze. "Ilara is mine," he said. "My mate, my Luna, my queen, whether the bond is completed or not. Anyone who moves against her moves against me, and I will respond accordingly." He paused, letting the words sink in. Are there any questions? There were not. That night, Ilara went to his chambers. She didn't know what she intended, didn't have a plan, didn't have pretty words prepared. She only knew that something had shifted inside her, watching him defend her so absolutely. Something had cracked open, letting light into places that had been dark for far too long. Caden opened the door in his shirt sleeves, his hair damp from a bath, surprise flickering across his features. Ilara, is everything all right? Can I come in? He stepped aside without a word. His chambers were larger than hers, but simpler than she'd expected. A massive bed dominated one wall, but the rest of the space was functional. A desk covered in papers, a weapons rack, a fireplace burning low. It smelled like him, pine and smoke and something wild underneath. You killed him, she said. For me. He was a traitor. But you killed him publicly, made an example of him, because of what he tried to do to me. Caden's jaw tightened. Yes. Why? She stepped closer, searching his face for answers she wasn't sure she'd find. Why do you keep fighting for me? The whole court thinks you've lost your mind. Your enemies are circling. The council has you trapped. And I can't even give you what you need to make this right. Ilara, tell me why. Please. I need to understand. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion he rarely showed. Because you're worth fighting for, you always were. He was just too blind to see it. The words hit her like a physical blow. Simple, direct, utterly sincere. Damien saw an Omega, Caden continued. A tool, a possession. He never looked deeper, never bothered to discover who you really were. But I see you, Ilara. I see the woman who walked through hell and came out the other side still standing. I see the courage it takes to trust again when trust has only brought you pain. I see... He stopped, swallowing hard. I see my mate, my equal, the other half of my soul. And I will fight for you until I have nothing left to fight with, because that's what you deserve. Ilara closed the distance between them. Her hands found his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her palms. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. I don't know if I can do this, if I can be what you need. You already are. His hands came up to cup her face, gentle as always, careful as always. Whatever happens, whatever you can or can't give me, you're already everything I've ever wanted. She rose on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't their first kiss. There had been soft, careful touches over the past weeks, exploratory and tentative. But this was different. This was deliberate. This was her choosing, finally, to stop running from the bond that hummed between them like a living thing. Caden groaned against her mouth, his arms coming around her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, heat building between them, and Ilara felt something stir in her chest, her wolf, rising toward the surface for the first time in months, reaching for its mate with desperate, joyful longing. Yes, that inner voice whispered. Finally. Yes. Caden's hands moved to her hips, lifting her effortlessly. She wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her toward the bed, his mouth never leaving hers. The world narrowed to sensation, his lips, his hands, the solid warmth of his body against hers. She was going to do this. She was going to complete the bond, right here, right now, and finally silence the voice in her head that said she was too broken to be wanted. The window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the room in a glittering storm. Caden twisted instinctively, shielding her with his body as three dark shapes came through the opening, wolves in human form, armed and moving with military precision. Get down! Caden shoved her behind him, shifting in a blur of breaking bone and tearing cloth. His wolf was massive, silver-grey and snarling, placing itself between her and the intruders. But they weren't looking at him. The Omega, one of them said. Grab her and go. Damien wants her alive. Ilara's blood went cold. They'd come for her. Not for Caden. Not for the throne. For her. Damien hadn't waited for the council's deadline. He'd sent his wolves to drag her back, to force a bond before anyone could stop him. Caden lunged, his jaws closing around the nearest attacker's throat. Blood sprayed across the stone floor, but the other two were already moving, one engaging the Alpha King, the other circling toward Ilara. She had no weapon, no wolf to defend her, or at least not one she could reach. She was an Omega, trained her whole life to submit, to yield, to let others fight her battles. No. Something snapped inside her. Something that had been building since the night of her rejection, through weeks of healing and growth and learning to see herself as something more than damaged goods. She was not going back. The attacker reached for her. Ilara ducked under his arm, grabbed a shard of broken glass from the floor, and drove it into his eye with every ounce of strength she possessed. His scream was cut short as she twisted the makeshift weapon deeper. He dropped, twitching, and she scrambled backward. Her hand slick with blood. The third attacker had Caden pinned, or tried to, but the Alpha King was already tearing free, his massive wolf form moving with lethal grace. Within seconds, the last of them was down, and Caden was shifting back, naked and blood-soaked, and scanning the room with wild eyes. "Ilara!" "I'm fine." Her voice shook, but she kept it steady. "I'm fine. They came for me." "Damien!" The name was a growl. He started a war. Alarms were sounding throughout the palace now, running footsteps, shouting voices, the clang of weapons being distributed. This wasn't just 3 wolves. This was the beginning of something larger. Caden crossed to her in 2 strides, pulling her against his chest, his hand cradling the back of her head. "I should have seen this coming. Should have increased security. Should have... You couldn't have known. He sent wolves into my palace to take you from my bed." His voice was shaking with rage. "He will pay for this with everything he has." Ilara looked up at him, at this Alpha who had killed to protect her, who had defied the council for her, who had just torn 3 wolves apart rather than let them touch her. "Then let's make him pay," she said. "Together." Something flickered in Caden's eyes. Pride, perhaps, or love, or both. "Together," he agreed. And somewhere deep inside her chest, Ilara's wolf lifted its head and howled. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. They took her while the palace burned. Ilara had been fighting, actually fighting, something she'd never done in her life, when the second wave hit. Caden's warriors were everywhere, silver and grey wolves clashing with Blackwood's darker forces, and in the chaos of blood and fire and screaming, she lost sight of him. That was when the hands closed around her. She kicked, bit, clawed at the wolves dragging her through the servants' corridors, but there were too many of them. 4, then 6, then more, forming a protective barrier around her struggling form as they moved through passages she'd never known existed. Secret routes. Someone had given Damien a map of the palace. Marcus, she thought dimly. Even dead, his betrayal was still bearing fruit. They broke through a hidden door and into the night. And then she was being thrown across a horse, her wrists bound, her screams muffled by rough cloth shoved between her teeth. The ground lurched beneath her as they rode, and all she could do was count the hoofbeats and try not to think about what waited at the end of this journey. She knew anyway. She'd always known. Damien was waiting. They made camp 3 hours from Silver Crown's border, in a clearing ringed by ancient pines. Ilara was hauled from the horse and dumped unceremoniously on the ground, her bound hands scraping against rocks and roots. Above her, stars wheeled in a sky that didn't care about the fate of one broken Omega. "Leave us." The voice cut through her disorientation like a blade. She knew that voice. Had heard it whisper sweet promises, had heard it turn cold with contempt, had heard it announce her worthlessness to 300 wolves while her blood dripped onto white silk. Damien stepped into the firelight. He looked different than she remembered. Harder somehow, the golden perfection of his features sharpened by something that might have been desperation. There were shadows under his eyes, a tightness around his mouth that hadn't been there before. "Hello, Elara." She didn't answer, couldn't, with the gag still in place. But she met his eyes and she didn't look away. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, at the defiance he found there. He'd expected her broken, expected her cowering, expected the submissive Omega he'd spent 2 years creating. He didn't know her anymore. "Remove the gag," he ordered. One of his wolves obeyed, and Elara spat the taste of dirty cloth from her mouth. "Caden will kill you for this," she said. Her voice was steadier than she'd expected. "Caden won't find us until it's too late." Damien crouched in front of her, close enough that she could smell the familiar scent of him. Pine and cedar, and underneath it, the rot of something wrong. "By dawn, you'll be bonded to me. Properly this time. The council will have no choice but to recognize it. I won't accept your bond. You won't have a choice." His smile was cold. "A forced bond isn't pleasant, I'll admit, but it's still a bond, still legally binding, still enough to make you mine in every way that matters." He reached out, his fingers brushing the place on her shoulder where his mark used to be. "I should never have let you go. That was my mistake. But I'm going to fix it now." Elara's stomach turned. She could feel his intent pressing against her, could feel the bond he was trying to force into existence. Her wolf recoiled, retreating deeper inside her, and for a moment she was back on that ceremonial platform, helpless and bleeding and broken. No. The word rose up from somewhere deep inside her. Not her wolf, something older, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. She thought of Caden, of his patience, his restraint, the way he'd held himself back even when his wolf was desperate to claim her. She thought of the weeks she'd spent at Silver Crown, learning that she was worth more than Damien had ever made her feel. She thought of the way Caden looked at her like she was something precious, something worth fighting for. She thought of the woman she'd become in his arms, and she felt her wolf stir. Not weakly this time, not the fragile flutter of a damaged creature too afraid to hope. This was something else, something fierce and ancient and absolutely furious. "Mine," her wolf snarled. "Not his. Never his again. Mine." Power surged through her veins. "What?" Damien jerked back, his eyes widening. "What are you doing?" Elara didn't know, couldn't explain the energy building inside her chest, the golden light that seemed to pulse beneath her skin. She only knew that for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid. She was angry. "You broke me," she said, and her voice didn't sound like her own. It was layered somehow, resonant, carrying harmonics that made the wolves around them whimper and lower their heads. "You took everything I was, and you shattered it because you could. Because I was an Omega, and Omegas don't matter. Because the moon goddess made a mistake when she bound me to you." "Elara." But she didn't make a mistake. Elara rose to her feet, and she felt the ropes around her wrists dissolve, not break, dissolve, like they'd never existed at all. She was testing me, burning away everything weak, everything false, until only the truth remained. The golden light was visible now, writhing beneath her skin like living flame. The Blackwood wolves were backing away, their eyes wide with terror. Even Damien had gone pale, his arrogant certainty crumbling in the face of something he didn't understand. "What are you?" he whispered. "I'm what you made me." Elara stepped toward him and he stumbled back. "I'm what every Omega could have been, before alphas like you bred the power out of us. I'm the balance that keeps the darkness at bay." The knowledge came to her like water flowing downhill, natural, inevitable, always meant to be. She understood now what she'd only glimpsed in that ancient book. The truth sense wasn't just a gift. It was a doorway, a connection to something far older than pack law, or alpha dominance, or the petty politics of wolves who had forgotten where they came from. The moon goddess's first wolves had been Omegas, Not submissive, not weak, balanced. They had held the power to strengthen bonds or sever them, to bring harmony or chaos, to heal the broken connections between wolves or tear them apart entirely. That power was in her blood, had always been in her blood, waiting for the right catalyst to wake it up. Damien had been that catalyst, his cruelty, his rejection, his absolute conviction that she was worthless. It had broken something inside her, yes, but it had also opened a door that could never be closed again. "Serena," Ilara said, and her voice carried power that made the air vibrate. "Bring her to me." The wolves didn't want to obey. She could see it in their faces, the terror warring with the instinct to submit to an alpha's command. But Damien wasn't giving commands anymore. Damien was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. One of the wolves broke from the group and ran into the trees. Moments later, he returned with Serena in tow. The she-wolf looked terrible. Her copper hair was lank and unwashed, her face gaunt, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. 2 years of trying to conceive, Ilara remembered. 2 years of failing. 2 years of being the Luna who couldn't give her alpha an heir. 2 years of learning what it felt like to be found wanting. "Ilara?" Serena's voice was barely a whisper. "What's happening?" "He never loved you." Ilara said it gently, without cruelty. "You know that, don't you? He chose you because you were useful, because your father's pack had warriors he needed. You were a political tool, just like I was supposed to be." Tears spilled down Serena's cheeks. "I know. The bond between you, it's incomplete, weak. It's been hurting you, hasn't it? Making you feel wrong, empty, like something vital is missing." "Yes." The word was a sob. "Every day. Every moment. I thought—" He said it would get better, but it never did. Ilara reached out and touched Serena's face, the incomplete bond, shattered like glass. Serena gasped, her eyes going wide, and then she collapsed to her knees with a cry that was equal parts pain and relief. The golden light pulsed between them for a moment, then faded, and when Serena looked up again, there was something different in her eyes. Freedom. After 2 years of servitude to a bond that was never real, she was finally free. "Go," Ilara said. "Find your true mate. Live." Serena stared at her for a long moment. Then she rose, stumbled toward the edge of the clearing, and ran into the darkness without looking back. Ilara turned to Damien. He was backing away, his hands raised as if to ward her off, his eyes wild with fear. "Stay away from me. Whatever you are, whatever that was, stay away. You wanted to force a bond with me." Ilara followed him, matching his retreat step for step. "You were going to take away my choice. My freedom, myself, just like you did before. Ilara, please, do you know what I felt when you rejected me?" She stopped in front of him, close enough to touch. The silence, the emptiness. My wolf went so far away I thought she was dead. For weeks I couldn't feel anything but this howling void where she used to be. "I'm sorry." The words tumbled out, desperate and meaningless. "I'm sorry, I didn't know, I didn't understand." "No, you didn't." Ilara placed her hand on his chest, over his heart. "Let me help you understand." The power flowed out of her like a river. She couldn't sever his bond to his wolf permanently. She wasn't sure anyone could do that without killing him, but she could silence it, could push it so far down that he couldn't reach it, couldn't feel it, couldn't access any of the strength and instinct that came with being a werewolf. She could make him feel exactly what she'd felt. Damien screamed. It was a horrible sound, raw and broken, torn from somewhere so deep it barely sounded human. He collapsed to his knees, clawing at his own chest, his eyes rolling back in his head as he felt his wolf disappear. "Where is it?" He was sobbing now, great heaving gasps that racked his whole body. "Where did it go? What did you do to me? What did you do?" "I showed you the truth." Ilara stepped back, watching him writhe on the ground. Tears were streaming down her own face, but they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of release, of finally. finally letting go of the pain she'd carried for so long. I showed you what it feels like to be alone inside your own mind, to reach for the part of yourself that makes you whole and find nothing but emptiness. Please. He crawled toward her, his pride forgotten, his arrogance stripped away. Please bring it back. I'll do anything. I'll let you go, I'll never touch you again, just please. It will come back. In a few hours, maybe a day. Ilara looked down at the man who had been her nightmare for so long, and she felt something unexpected. Pity. You were never strong, she said quietly. Your wolf made you strong. Your pack made you strong. But you, Damien, you're just a scared little boy who never learned that power isn't the same as worth. She turned away from him and walked directly into Caden's arms. He'd arrived with 50 wolves at his back, Silver Crown's best warriors ready to tear through anything that stood between their alpha and his mate. But they'd found no battle waiting for them, only a clearing full of terrified Blackwood wolves, their alpha weeping in the dirt, and Ilara standing in the centre of it all like a goddess made flesh. Caden hadn't hesitated. He'd shifted, crossed the clearing in 3 strides, and pulled her against him so tightly she could barely breathe. I thought I'd lost you. His voice was rough, broken. I thought, I'm here. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the thundering beat of his heart. I'm right here. What happened? The power I felt, everyone felt it. Later. She pulled back just enough to look at him, this alpha who had waited for her, fought for her, loved her when she couldn't love herself. There's something I need to do first, understanding dawned in his eyes. Ilara, you don't have to. I want to. She stepped back, and in front of both packs, Silver Crown and Blackwood, warriors and witnesses, enemies and allies, she tilted her head to the side, she exposed her throat. The clearing went absolutely silent. Every wolf knew what that gesture meant. Submission. Surrender. The most vulnerable position a wolf could take, offering their life to another without defense or condition. But Ilara wasn't doing it out of weakness. She wasn't cowering, wasn't cringing, wasn't giving in to an alpha's demand. She was choosing. I choose you, she said. I choose your pack, your home, your life. I choose to be your Luna, your mate, your partner in everything that comes, not because you're forcing me. Not because I have no other options, but because you showed me what it means to be valued. Because you waited when you could have taken. Because you believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Caden's wolf surged forward, his eyes blazing gold, but he held himself still. Even now, even with her offering everything he wanted, he waited. Are you sure? His voice was barely human. Ilara, once I mark you, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He moved so fast she barely saw it. One moment he was standing before her, the next his teeth were sinking into her shoulder, his mark burning into her skin where Damien's scar had been. The pain was exquisite, the pleasure was overwhelming, and the bond was everything. It crashed through her like a tidal wave, golden and warm and absolutely right. She felt Caden's wolf merge with hers, felt their souls intertwine in a way that could never be undone. She felt his love, his devotion, his fierce protective instinct, and underneath it all, a joy so profound it brought fresh tears to her eyes. Mine, his wolf said. Yours, hers answered. Finally, forever, yours. When Caden lifted his head, his mouth stained with her blood, his eyes still burning gold, she saw everything she'd ever wanted reflected in his gaze. My Luna, he breathed. My Alpha, she answered. And then he was kissing her, and the wolves were howling, and somewhere in the dirt behind them, Damien was sobbing out his pain to an uncaring sky. She didn't spare him another thought. 6 months later, the Council of Alphas had ruled in Caden's favour within a week of the battle. The bond was undeniable. Even the most sceptical council members could feel its power from across a room. Combined with Damien's violation of treaty law by attacking Silver Crown directly, there had never really been any question of the outcome. Blackwood Pack was placed under severe sanctions. Their territory was reduced by a third, their warriors forbidden from crossing into neighbouring lands without express permission. Damien himself was stripped of his seat on the council, his reputation destroyed beyond repair. 3 months later, his own beta challenged him for leadership. The fight lasted less than a minute. Damien, still struggling to fully reconnect with his wolf after what Ilara had done to him, never stood a chance. The new alpha, a wolf named Garrett who had quietly loved Serena for years and watched Damien destroy her without being able to intervene, made it quick. Serena returned to Blackwood 2 weeks after that, not as Luna, but as Garrett's mate, a position she'd been born to fill. The bond between them was everything her bond with Damien never had been. Complete, equal, true. Ilara received a letter from her a month later. A simple note, just a few lines. "Thank you for setting me free. I didn't know what I was missing until you showed me. I hope you find as much happiness as I have." She had. 3 months later, "You're going to wear a groove in the stone if you keep pacing like that." Caden stopped mid-stride, turning to face his mate with an expression caught between terror and joy. "Miriam's been in there for 2 hours. How long does it take to confirm a pregnancy?" "As long as it takes." Ilara was sitting by the window of their chambers, her hands folded over her stomach, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Miriam is thorough. You know that. But what if something's wrong? What if—" "Caden." She rose, crossed to him, took his face in her hands. "Whatever the healers find, we'll face it together. That's what mates do." He pressed his forehead to hers, some of the tension draining from his shoulders. "I know. I'm sorry. I want this so badly. I want you to have everything you deserve." "I already have everything I deserve." She kissed him softly. "I have you." The door opened, and Miriam emerged with an expression that gave away nothing. She was infuriatingly good at that, Ilara had learned. The head healer could deliver news of impending doom or miraculous recovery with exactly the same neutral expression. "Well?" Caden demanded. Are we—" "Congratulations, Your Majesty." A smile finally cracked Miriam's stoic facade. "You're going to be a father." The sound Caden made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He swept Ilara into his arms, spinning her around, burying his face in her neck. "There's more," Miriam continued, and something in her voice made them both freeze. "The pregnancy is unusual. I've never seen anything quite like it." "Unusual how?" Ilara's hand went to her stomach. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Quite the opposite." Miriam's smile widened. "Luna Ilara, you're carrying twins." The world stopped. Twins. In werewolf bloodlines, twins were almost unheard of. They happened perhaps once in a generation, if that. They were considered a direct blessing from the moon goddess herself, a sign of extraordinary favour. "Twins," Caden repeated, his voice stunned. "We're having twins." 2 healthy heartbeats, Miriam confirmed. "Strong ones. Whatever power runs in your Luna's bloodline, it seems your children have inherited it." She paused. "Congratulations to you both. The moon goddess has blessed this union beyond anything I've ever witnessed." She left them alone, closing the door softly behind her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just held each other, wrapped in the warmth of a future neither had dared to imagine. "I can't believe it," Ilara finally whispered. "Twins." "I can." Caden pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "The moon goddess knew what she was doing when she made you for me. She knew you were extraordinary. She was just waiting for the rest of the world to catch up." Epilogue. The balcony of Silver Crown Palace looked out over miles of forest and mountain, territory that had belonged to Caden's family for generations. In the distance, Ilara could see the lights of the village, the training grounds where young wolves learned to fight, the gardens where she had first begun to heal. It was her home now, her kingdom, her pack. She rested her hands on her swelling belly, feeling the flutter of movement within. The twins were active today, restless, as if they couldn't wait to meet the world. "You should be inside," Caden's voice came from behind her, warm with concern, his arms wrapped around her, his hands covering hers over their children. "Miriam said you need rest." "Miriam says a lot of things." But Ilara leaned back into his embrace, letting his warmth surround her. "I just wanted to see the sunset. I wanted to remember." "Remember what?" "How it felt when I first came here, how broken I was, how sure I was that I would never feel whole again." She turned her head to look up at him, at this alpha who had become her everything. "You saved me, you know. Not by fighting for me, though you did that too. You saved me by making me believe I was worth saving. You were always worth saving." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You were just waiting for someone who could see it." Below them, wolves were emerging for the evening run, shifting and racing through the trees in the silver light of the rising moon. Ilara watched them go, feeling the pull of her own wolf, eager to join her pack. "Soon," she promised. "Soon we'll run again. But for now, this moment is enough." "Do you ever think about what would have happened?" she asked. "If I hadn't stumbled into your territory that night? If your patrol had found me too late?" "No." Caden's answer was immediate. "The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. She put you exactly where you needed to be, exactly when you needed to be there. Everything that happened, even the pain, even the darkness, was leading you here. To me. To this." Ilara smiled, watching the moon climb higher into the sky, the same moon that had watched her rejection, her flight, her rebirth. The same moon that had blessed their union and their children. She had been so sure once that the moon goddess was cruel. That fate was punishment. That love was a weapon wielded by the powerful against the weak. She knew better now. "They'll say we're a fairy tale," she murmured. "The rejected Omega who became a Luna. The broken wolf who found her true mate. They'll tell our story around fires for generations. Let them." Caden pulled her closer, his chin resting on top of her head. "As long as I get to live it with you." In her belly, the twins kicked in agreement. Ilara closed her eyes and let herself feel it all. The mate bond humming between them, the new lives growing inside her, the pack below and the kingdom around them. Everything she had lost, everything she had survived, everything she had become. She had been rejected, broken, discarded like something worthless, but she had never been worthless. She had been waiting for the fire that would burn away everything she wasn't, leaving only the truth of who she'd always been meant to be. Luna of Silver Crown, mate of the Alpha King, mother of twins blessed by the moon goddess herself, she was never broken. She was just waiting for someone worthy of her fire. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.